Get ready to be amazed. Get ready to know things that nobody could know. Get ready for Recovery Wednesday with America's original radio psychic, Dr. Linda Salvin, along with Candy Finnegan from the Emmy Award-winning television show Intervention. Candy brings her more than 30 years of experience dealing with all areas of recovery. Listen as Candy and Dr. Linda bring expert guests into the conversation to bring your recovery to the next level. Together, they bring you the tools and techniques that bring balance and serenity to your life. For nearly 30 years as a syndicated talk show host and metaphysical clinician, Dr. Linda has helped thousands of people worldwide solve problems on the air and in person with her insights and solutions. So pull up a chair, turn it up, and get ready for a visit with the one and only Dr. Linda. And now, live from Los Angeles, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Linda Salvin.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another segment of Recovery Wednesday. I'm Dr. Linda Salvin, and my co-host Candy Finnegan will be on in just a moment. Today's show, we're going to talk about topics that a lot of people love to know about, a lot of people don't quite understand, or may even be a victim of and can't identify it within themselves. And that's about codependency versus enabling. And we're all guilty of it at some point in our life with relationships, whether it's at work, our family, our loved ones, in our intimate relationships, boyfriends, girlfriends, chasing, running, trying to find the soulmate, the love of your life. Is it really love, or is it an addiction? What is codependency? What is enabling? All these questions are going to be talked about throughout the next hour. So hang out with us. And if you have any comments, you can always add to the chat, or after the show, you can contact me, Dr. Linda at lindasalvin.com, or Candy Finnegan at AOL.com. Let's bring Candy on. Say hi for this show. Hey, Candy.
Hi. How are you?
Good. How are you today? It's good to see you.
We both survived the hurricane.
We survived the hurricane.
One more thing we survived. Lord.
Well, Candy had a worse situation than I did because she has so much outdoor furniture and gadgets and bird cages and things, or I just had a couple of things that I let get wet. But yes, we were sort of informed that it would be worse than it really was. At least in our area, there were floods. I'm not going to say that Southern California didn't get hit, especially the desert. The desert got muddy.
Just awful.
Highways
are closed.
Yeah. Coming home last night, Whitsett and Moore Park was flooded last night. I don't know if it was I don't know if a pipe broke or whatever, but coming in, it was a mess. So, yes, we survived the hurricane. So for those of you that aren't in Southern California, yes, we had a hurricane Sunday through Monday. It rained a lot. I kept waking up thinking, oh, did it rain? Like a little girl waiting to see, the big day.
Yeah, the big storm come in.
And Candy and I were talking throughout the day. Oh, it's pouring over here. What's pouring over here? But anyway, we did survive, and you survived. And a lot of what goes on out there is more fear-based, or people are getting more frightened. But the truth is, if you have God's spirituality and some form of a way to balance yourself, even though there's anxiety out there, let go, let God, we're still here, and you can ground yourself. We're going to talk about those kind of feelings in this show. So, Candy,
well,
talking codependency. I'm sorry?
And behaviors.
Well, it's all part of it, of course. So define codependency, because you work with it a lot more than I do in my practice, but in addiction especially, the neediness or the attachment.
What I learned a long time ago, and actually I learned it from Pia Melody, is the definition is codependent relationships make excuses for the other person and goes along behind them clearing up their mess. Enabling is someone who means helping them, wants to help them in a way that allows the addiction or the behavior to continue with no consequences.
So let me ask you a question for an example. So if somebody's enabling, say, a child, their offspring who happens to be an addict, so or an alcoholic, or sick, is addicted, and the mother or father continues to pay their rent or buy them
Yeah.
cars and clothes and food and live them at home or whatever, rather than forcing them or encouraging them or helping them detox, get well, get on their own feet. Isn't that part of enabling, where they're being
constant making excuses for them and covering them, whether it's at work or Christmas dinner or whatever it is? Enabling is allowing the addiction to end, any other that's harmful behavior to continue going, because it's easier for them to deal with that than any confrontation. Because usually, Linda, confronting an addict or an alcoholic, you might get slammed doors and not come out of the room. You could get yelling and screaming and how dare you, and I do this because you make me, and it's the enabling part of it. I think that codependency maybe comes before enabling. I think it's a much more severe, because with codependency, you're making excuses but you're cleaning up their mess.
Well, there's also the confusion and the denial and false hopes and disappointments and guilt and other emotions, isolation, alienation, euphoria. We get really high and then we crash. The anger, the disgust, or my mom used to say, "You're not grateful," or, and it's like, grateful. I was grateful, but it's just, I got beat up a lot because of her attitude and how she was raised. It's generational too. We inherit or we learn from our parents, and our generation, and the beauty of treatment or healing is breaking the mold, breaking the behavior, and changing some of it. We're not going to be perfect, but I think even in codependency, there's a super preoccupation with the drug and alcohol, right? Yeah. It's like constantly fantasizing, where am I going to get the money? Where am I going to go to what bar or whatever, right?
Well, when I first got into this business,
of helping people,
I did not really believe that codependency was severe. But in my travels and my journey and in my career, I have seen codependents more extremely sick than the addict alcoholic. And it was maybe...
So you're talking either the employer or the family members or a spouse or somebody?
Absolutely. The employer doesn't want to lose the employee, and so they cover for them. The family can't believe that this kind of lying, cheating, and stealing is anything that they raised, because they're compromising their values. And they love them so much. How could they do this to them? And, it's like there is actual treatment for codependency.
So that's also where tough love comes in then, right? If the codependent...
No, you can't change that codependent enabling with tough love. Tough love was a situation that came down that, what does that mean? It's an oxymoron. I mean, tough love is you're going to kick them out of the house. Well, they're still going to use it. They still might die. I think there was a time when we didn't know what else to do. So we conjured up the verbiage, tough love. I don't think it makes any sense. Ignoring them, not getting them help. Is that tough love? No, it's like, I just got an email today from a woman that I've been trying to help with her son for a really long time. I put him in 3 treatments. He always leaves. He always drinks. He always goes back, and he's sorry. And then he gets arrested. And of course, this time is different. And she always makes excuses for him. He was an alcoholic and still is. He's a young guy, talented. And so now she's much more certain that he's mentally ill. And he's mentally ill and drinking is his medication.
Okay. Self-medicating. That's going to solve the problem.
So it's more excuses. And she doesn't clean up his mess anymore, but she won't leave it alone.
So if you take her out of the equation about him, then you look at her own enabling disability. That's what you're giving a hi, Dean. I'm glad it's about you. It's always about you. It's always about him. Right. Dean owns the station. I've known Dean on and off for years. I drive him crazy. But now we know why I can drive him crazy. And he understands me because he gets it. And so he's getting it. You can join the chat, or even if you want, Dean, pop up on the screen and say hi to Candy and join the show if you want. The enabler, then, you were just describing, so the mother or the father who makes the excuses.
The father has totally washed his hands of this kid.
Okay, so the mom sees the son self-medicating, and yet will still make excuses. So let's take away the son and look at mom. So mom's either got some form of codependent or enabling addictive behavior where she has to manipulate and control son and make sure son.
Here's why. When your kids get older, and I mean, when they're younger, it's kind of explainable. But as they get older, what you've hoped you've done is teach them manners and respect and how to be a good person and how not to lie and how not to run into the street or touch the stove all the simple things in life. But all of a sudden, you're not needed. So now you have an alcoholic, addicted child, and you love them unconditionally, more than anything. And so you make this child almost sicker so they need you.
I get
now,
it.
This
so
particular son doesn't stay in touch with anybody but his mother. And his mother's jumping through 1,000 hoops. She's talking to the head of probation. She's trying to get him out of jail because it's the 6th time.
Or paying off his debts because he's always in debt. Right.
For disturbing the peace and drunk in public. And, well, that's not so serious, she says. It is serious. Come on.
He's in jail and that's not serious? What more does he need? I mean,
it isn't like he's hurting someone.
Right.
And I went, well, this woman, by the way, is a professor. And she's very active in her church. She kind of lives in a small town. And I just wrote her the truth about 2 hours ago. And I said, look, he doesn't want help. You want him to get help. He'll do it to appease you so the money doesn't stop, or the getting the car repaired.
But he'll hit his bottom. Eventually, people usually hit a bottom most of the time.
Not if these people keep enabling him. If they keep cleaning up the mess, this could go on forever.
Because he doesn't have to accept responsibility. And that's what it boils down to.
Or, as we like to say, grow up.
Yeah, that too. I'm almost 70. I haven't grown up yet. What was that old sign? I think you gave it to me, or somebody gave it to me. If I haven't grown up by the time I'm 50, I'm okay. And then it was 60. Now it's 70. We don't really grow up. We mature. We take on responsibility. We know how to pay our bills and pay the rent or the mortgage or be nice or tell the truth.
We don't. And who covers us?
Either a friend, a loved one. Yeah,
we do. But with a sick child, they do.
Well, so you and I, we know some people, some clients where, there's professional parents, and then the son or daughter might be in their 30s and addicted, in and out of treatment, and don't want to stay sober, but can live with mommy or daddy and live off of mommy and daddy. And then daddy or mommy still fights or has their own struggles, but they can't really kick daughter or son out of either guilt or fear or all the other feelings that go along with the dynamic of two unbalanced, untreated people.
So if we start with codependency with the sheet I gave you,
Yeah.
These are sheets that I include in my intervention packet. And there's 3 different levels. There's early, middle, and chronic. And so I'm just going to go to the chronic.
Yeah, because that's the worst chapter.
The other is kind of.
Well, I'll just run through it. Like when there's rejection or there's rage and constant worry, or in my business, people want to know, when's he going to call? Is she going to call? Are we getting back together? Does he really love me? I says you're becoming obsessive about the outcome. And a lot of times, yes, I see that person reuniting with, but it's the emotional vacuum or worry or anxiety in between until somebody can become comfortable. That's part of the codependency of needing somebody, whether it's real love or codependent love. Then when it shifts into the chronic symptoms, you take over from there and talk about the decline and everything and the role reversal, please.
Yeah, well, it's like the chronic symptoms are, decline in independence because they're so latched on to the alcoholic addict or dysfunctional person. There's role reversal. They almost go to them for love because they've kind of ostracized every other family member, withdraw from other family and community members, fining, nagging, verbal abuse, psychosomatic ailments. You're making me sick. You're giving me this headache. Sexual problems, avoid social occasions with drinking, lying, constant covering up, threats, hiding, not being seen, paranoia about seeing others, most personal use of chemical joined with chemically dependent person, even drinking with them in some cases, self-absorbing isolation, and no outlet. So, it says families must let the alcoholic take the consequences of his drinking or using and focus less on them and more on their own feelings. I think that's a great statement, but they don't have any feelings. They
don't understand what the feelings
are. Your feelings.
Right, or the anxiety or the fear or the ineptness of
they always have the eggshell syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Walking down, I don't want to get him angry at me. I don't want him mad at me. I don't want him to yell. I'm doing everything I can. Just this one last time,
We have Dean backstage, and I want to bring Dean on because he's relating to our conversation. So I think it'd be nice to have another opinion here, and then we'll continue talking about the behavior because, you're right, where it does say that families must let the alcoholic take the consequences of his drinking and focus less on them and more on their own feelings. But most people don't know how to detach. Most people get afraid of letting go of a bad situation out of fear of what happens to me. How do I live without the drink, the drug, the man, the girl? It's like to just be. And that's where God's spirituality and my practice comes in, where I teach people metaphysically the word, I don't want to be alone. Well, if you break up the word alone, it's all one. So I help people try to see we're still all one with what's out there. There's always somebody somewhere to talk to. There's a lot of people that don't want to talk to me or you or them or him or her because
they don't want to get better. Because always the anthem is, this won't work for me. You don't understand me. My case is different. And the truth of it is, no, it isn't.
Here comes Dean in Miami or wherever you are, sitting outside, or is that just a fan blowing your hair?
Actually, no, that is the virtual background.
Oh, that's right.
And I'm in Huntington Beach, according to this background.
Yeah, well, it survived the hurricane the other day. It's good to see
I know. I've been to all those different things. I live in hurricane country now. I've lived in earthquake country. I can't say I've ever been anywhere like that where you had a hurricane and an earthquake in the same day.
Oh, I don't think it was real. But Candy, meet Dean. Dean,
well,
meet
Candy. We're going to ignore her because I think it was real. I was sitting in my backyard.
Oh, it was real.
With
it
25
was
mile-an-hour winds and praying to God my pool didn't come into my house.
And I was at
Yeah,
the
that's
top,
nothing compared to
all of a
Florida.
sudden, though, we're like this. The house is like this. I'm like, oh, we're having an earthquake. But Candy and I had dinner the night before because we were talking about the show. I said, watch, on top of the hurricane, we'll have a quake. And we did.
Yeah, we did.
So,
Tell you what, they always said California's going to fall off into the ocean. We're
well,
getting closer.
I'm from Kansas, and we always jokingly said it might take a while, but Kansas might have beachfront
property. Back in 1969, talking about drugs and alcohol, a group of us from high school, I think I was in 11th grade, we heard California was going to fall off and fall into the ocean. So we all took a hit of mescaline and we drove down to the beach.
Enjoy it for the last time?
We did. And we came home and the beach, Serrano Beach, is still there in Santa Monica. It hasn't fallen yet.
I grew up with
Exactly.
tornadoes.
We had tornadoes. We had quakes.
You knew they were coming.
We did. Well, let's get back on topic. So when you've got, 8 grandchildren?
Yes.
How many children?
I have 4 children, 8 grandchildren. 3 of those children are daughters. And I chose today to tune into your show because, I share that same mental capability. Yes. And I don't know. I pulled it up on my TV, actually. So I was watching it, and I'm like, holy crap. It's about me.
Yeah, that's what the show's about. Hopefully it reaches people.
And it wasn't ego, because normally that's what it would be. It would be ego. But
I know.
I am a child of 2 high-functioning, high-class addicts. I am the picture you see in the dictionary for high class.
Meaning because they had wealth and they had status.
They were, they acted with class. They didn't act like they were like some junkie,
Yeah, it's like becoming,
And, it's funny because the picture in the dictionary of codependent is definitely me. And you'll laugh because I never thought of it that way. I always thought of myself as advantaged, actually, until somebody said to me that, and it was after I was going through my divorce, and they're like, "You're codependent," and I want to say this for all the people listening because
Thank
my
you.
answer.
Go on.
My answer to her. This was a friend of mine who was also a therapist, so she was giving me a legit thing. It wasn't just an opinion, and I'm like, what are you talking about? I've never depended on anybody. And that's what I thought that meant. And I'm highly educated. So I imagine a lot of people think that way. And then she explained it to me. I'm like, holy crap, you're right. And, it's funny you asked about my kids and grandkids, and I'll speak more about my kids, especially the daughters.
Well, the only reason I asked,
use it.
Of course, but the only reason I asked, because I don't want to do the whole show on that, it's just that you see with your family, you've had 4 kids that gave you 8 grandkids, you've had a wife, parents, you see. So in this process of your life, in your 50s, there's been abuse, addiction, codependency, enabling, pain, all of this you relate to as a human being, which is what everybody experiences at some time. Only some are more sick than others or more affected.
Or they don't realize it, like me.
No, this is right, because they deny the behavior or the term. They can't.
It is as progressive as any other function.
Yeah. And I can speak for myself that I always thought it was cool when I was younger. It wasn't until this stage of life that I realized that codependency did not serve me well. I always thought it made me a better person, and it did not serve me well. And
you got more introspective, and you got to see the definition and apply it, and then you see your own part in it and how you behave with others and your relationships. But my question,
I can't say no to my kids. They know how to work things.
But let me stop right here because I believe in some senses that isn't codependency. And the reason is because these gifts that were given to you and I Not only do we want to be proud of them, and we want to be proud of ourselves for raising good kids, because I've got to, but the situation is that why would you say no to them when it isn't hurting anybody? Because a lot of times with me, I didn't even know really what was going on. My daughter lives in Oregon, my son lives in Marin County above San Francisco, and I just made excuses, not really for them, but for myself. Well, these are adult children of alcoholics, because my husband and I are both in recovery. We're in recovery. I just lost my husband, but it's that situation where if they're not hurting anybody, but what I didn't realize is they're hurting themselves.
Exactly. See inside, right?
My son is so codependent, and if I said that to him, and he was so insulted. He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, Kelly, you imagine things all the time that are true, but you take it upon yourself as it's your fault. If only. I'm sorry. What if I would have done it this way?" And I said, somebody that you are in love with has to be responsible for themselves. You can't be all things to all people. And he went like this. "Well, you are." So
it does
went,
get frustrating too. It does get frustrating too, right?
It's very frustrating, and it's also when you got somebody that's got Munchausen syndrome, where they try to keep somebody sick to make them feel needed. It's almost
I lived with that my whole life.
I know, we've talked about it, like my dad and his situation. You see it. And Dean, you've become aware through time, and you're more spiritually open than you might have been 25 years ago or whatever, but you've been on a path. A lot of people, men especially, are slower to engage in health behavior and mental health behavior. So you're at least open. But the fact that you've raised daughters, the fact that you've raised daughters more than sons gave you a perspective as to how bitchy and mean and crazy.
It's old daddy girl thing.
Well, they also know how to use the codependency, because they manipulate my codependency all the time.
Well, but that's their job, Dean.
That's what I always felt too. But it's interesting. Like, I think of some of the things that I did for my father. I'm like, I would have never gotten away with that. Like, my kids, I would have never got. My dad tried to get me to break him out of a mental hospital. That's just one story. And I think about some of these things I looked at as adventures and normal life, that I'm like, if I ever tried that with my kids, or they'd be like, yeah, no, Dad.
Well, it's like when I tell, like this woman I was just talking about, who's so codependent. And I said to her, do not bail him out of jail. He's in a little jail in a little town in California. They've got some grandmother who cooks for them, and that's no lie, and brings in little, chicken and dumplings at night and a fresh pie. And I said,
matzo balls?
Yeah, I said, leave him in there. Whoa, I'm not going to leave my son in jail. And I said, and so he's back out on the street because you won't let him come in your house. So leave him in jail. So she did. And I'm telling you, that warden probably was going to kill somebody. She called 3 times a day to see what he'd had for breakfast. Is he
okay? Now that's codependent to micromanage every single step of the way. That's different. Let's get back to the enabling, because I think what we should do, if Dean wants to join at another stage, we could do a whole show just on the stages of love addiction. I'll put that topic away. Let's go back to the codependent enabling, because that's parental, it's relationship, it's employee employer, it's life, it's dealing in different relationships that we don't always have control. We all have a voice, we all have an opinion, but because we all come from somewhere, it's learning how to express ourselves properly.
when one member of a relationship gets sober and the other one, let's say, was not an alcoholic or an addict, 68% of all those relationships break up.
Yeah, they do. We've
And
seen it
the
ourselves,
reason
haven't we?
is not because they had a problem. It's because either the husband or the wife don't feel needed anymore.
Right. 100%.
And so in that situation, if you don't love me and I'm not keeping you alive and I'm not covering for you all the time, so,
But
because
doesn't that
nobody
also
wants
go
to
into
be around-
Munchausen's by proxy? Isn't that more along those lines as well? As
No.
long as I keep feeding.
No.
Yeah, see, I don't think so either.
No, it isn't at all. My brother was diagnosed with Munchausen's, and in some senses by proxy, because it was I'm adopted, and so's my brother, and my mother lost a biological child when she was 7 to polio, and then she had a stillbirth 4 months later. So, and then could not have any natural children. So my mother almost wanted my brother to be sick because she couldn't save her own daughter. She thought she could save him, and she created a monster.
Yeah.
And that is the difference, because for me, I can say that it's not a matter of you're going to keep somebody sick so you can take care of them. It's more like what you were explaining. It's like when they get better, then you don't feel useful anymore.
Well, then you don't feel loved. So
Yeah.
in this enabling sheet, it says, and these are the behaviors, and they're very different than codependency.
Well,
It
denying
says
that the person is abusing drugs, keeping your
denying
feelings
that, yeah,
inside.
and keeping your feelings inside, avoiding problems, keeping the peace, that's that eggshell syndrome, believing lack of conflict will solve problems. It's not so bad, things will get better. He promised he'd stop on Monday. Protecting the chemically dependent person from pain, psychological moment. Protecting the chemically dependent person always from anything, lecturing, blaming, and criticizing the chemically dependent person, taking over all their responsibilities and still giving them credit for it, feeling superior, treating the dependent person like a child, controlling, enduring, this too shall pass.
Let me ask
And
you a
the last
question.
one is, God will take care of this if only we pray. And when I do interventions, and I say to people all the time, I've been praying to God that, that he would heal him and get him help. And I always look at him and say, he sent me. I mean, he's kind of busy.
Yeah, they
So,
don't see the message that
yeah,
there's
I
still
mean, it's
angels
like-
on earth.
It's not the message, it's the messenger.
Let me ask you a
And-
question about that, though. I want to. What about the person that gets well, heals, becomes responsible after being sick, codependent, out there, broke, making a mess, can't function? Then all of a sudden goes through their process and integrates mental, emotional, physical being, and all of a sudden they're productive in society. Then people back off. Is it that the people back off because they don't like seeing the well and they feel unneeded
No,
again, or
because
are they
they're-
intimidated?
No, they're not needed. They're not needed. They just need to be a mother or a father or a sister or a husband or a wife. They don't need to all encompass this person's life to save them, because who else will? Well, the only person that can save an addict and alcoholic is only one person.
It sounds.
So it's a incredible conflict. And adult children of alcoholics, which I have 2 of, are always codependent. In my situation, it isn't as bad as somebody who didn't get sober and they've lived with an alcoholic parent their whole life, starting as a small child. They have a dependency always to go to another level of finding somebody to love that they think they can save, since they couldn't save their parents. And you see women and men over and over again marrying the same person, marrying their mother. and girls
I married my
marry
father till I
and
realized I
they
married
might
my
get
mother.
divorced
Yeah,
because
or I
they're
married my mother
horrible
till I realized.
alcoholics, and then by God they marry another one. Well, I didn't know she was alcoholic.
Well,
Really?
I can testify to that too because I've married 2 addicts.
Well, congratulations.
But there was something in you that either needed to fix or love, or it would be okay, or
Because
you could
my
feel
Well,
it.
whole
he
life
couldn't
is-
fix his dad. Remember, we just went back to that.
My whole life was with addicts, so it was the comfort zone, you know.
That's
and
what love looked like, Dean, and that's the honest to God truth. You know, so you almost have to retrain your thinking.
oh, that's what I've been doing, and people don't like it, by the way.
No,
When
that's
you
what I just
are
said.
no
If you get
longer
well,
codependent,
because they
like
can't take care of you, they can't give you advice, they can't pick up
Well, they
Dean,
take
oh poor
advantage.
Dean. They can't feel sorry for you.
well, even with the fact that they can't manipulate you, like it bothers my kids at times that I'm not. They're like, you're not the, and my ex-wife said, you're not the same.
The
and
same
it's not for
husband
the-
I married.
It's not for the better, and it's not for the better. The reason it's not for the better is because she gets upset. She can't manipulate me now.
You got better though. You got better, and she
Well,
did. You're up here now, and she's still here where you were here, and now you've excelled in your own spirit.
But
That's
by
the beauty.
belittling you and your behavior, it makes her feel better. And I know why I divorced you.
Right, yeah, no doubt. And listen, I'll tell you something else too that's interesting that I found out that I think many men need to know. I was always Prince Charming syndrome. Prince Charming syndrome is codependency.
Yes,
People
it is.
think it's a good thing. I used to think it was a good thing, and I'm this romantic and blah, 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 blah. It really is a nice way of saying you're codependent.
Or a nice way of saying, please don't find fault with me.
Just love me. Aren't I cute? Aren't I handsome? Aren't I giving you everything? Aren't I wonderful? I am Prince Charming. I will rescue you. I will find you the glass slipper. Yeah, you can do no wrong. You're my queen. And then all of a sudden we start throwing acid on you. I come from dysfunction, 3 suicides, a lot of depression, of course. You know, everybody was killed in the camps. And then my grandfather, great uncle, and my uncle all committed suicide in my lifetime. My mom, I think now she's gone 14 years and she didn't drink. She smoked cigarettes, took diet pills, and that's where I got my pill addiction when I was 13 when I started. But I look back and I have a picture of her and I talked to her and I wonder how she raised 3 children because her dad died when she was 25. So there was me and I think a sister on the way at 2.5 or something when my grandpa committed suicide. And how this woman kept going with the pain and the suffering of her family, but she was not crying in front of us. I don't remember breaking down. As she got older, she'd start crying, or when one of my sisters abandoned her for reasons Candy knows. And I was there. I think I enabled my mom during those days after my sister got married and they rejected my mom. And I showed up every Saturday for lunch and shopping because she'd cry and she was heartbroken and I felt bad. So that probably was my enabling, or maybe it was codependent, or I just loved my mom and I didn't want to see her hurt. We take on different roles, but we all come from some type of trauma, or there's no Ozzie and Harriet lifestyle out there. There's not, you know, the kings and queens and
It's funny.
Just remember, I always want to remind everybody how Ricky Nelson died.
Drugs in an airplane crash.
It's interesting that you brought up that whole Ozzie and Harriet thing because in a similar vein, that's always been something people have said to me my whole life. Like I was always looking for the Leave It to Beaver lifestyle because it's the same thing. It's that you're looking at this thing on TV that's not real, but it's so
not.
Oh, but
I know, right?
Dean, I don't know how old you are, but think about there was Donna Reed show.
Yeah, I know that show.
Father Knows Best.
Yeah.
The guy who had the butler and the father and had 2 adopted kids.
Buffy and Jody.
Yes, and they both died.
Family Affair.
Well, they both died of drug addiction. Both of them did, the kids. And you had Ozzie and Harriet. You had, I mean, we grew up, the Brady Bunch. Come on.
Oh, yeah, that's another one that's a laugh in my house. Like, I wanted the Brady Bunch family.
Well, but the truth of it is that in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, we didn't, have the trouble. We didn't have the communication. We didn't have social media. We didn't know what our next door neighbor was doing because we could bring them up on Facebook. So we all wanted to have the American dream. And that's what it looked like. Even though somebody said not very long ago, I was on a podcast out of New York, and they were talking about the Ozzie and Harriet syndrome. And I said, okay, you guys, here's the question. What did Ozzie do for a living?
Sales? Insurance?
No.
What did he do? No, that was Cleaver.
Salesman. He was an insurance salesman.
Yeah.
But it's like when you looked at Harriet and Donna Reed before the husband came home.
They were all housekeepers and dressed up
and was making dinner and
had their apron. Everything was fine. Okay, Beaver, please set the table. No, go to your room. Go talk to
the
Wally.
Only person that didn't do that was Lucy and Desi.
Well, no, they had their spats, but in those days they still had separate beds. Remember, they couldn't even sleep in the same bed at those days of production. We're almost out of time. Gene, I'd love you to come back and give a male perspective, if you would, in another show. We can talk to you about a topic, because I think with Candy's experience, she was on the TV show Intervention for 10 years. I don't know if you ever watched Intervention, but this is Candy Finnegan. And Candy's book, by the way, is called When Enough is Enough. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and every place else. If you have a problem in your own family and you need a guide, Candy wrote the book on how to intervene. So you can find.
As far as codependent, I want to tell you something quite funny. There are no books on enabling.
Maybe we should write it.
14 books on codependency.
Because if somebody writes it on enabling, they're enabling the secrets on how to get well. Maybe that's our next project.
It's just so funny because, as I said before, it's almost like codependency comes before enabling.
Well, then why don't we?
Well, yeah, what is that famous book? There's one.
Codependent No More.
Codependent No More.
That's the one.
Melody Beattie. Yeah.
I've
spoken to Melody. She's great. I can maybe get her on.
No More.
We'll see.
And Facing Codependency with Pia Melody. Both of them are excellent reads.
I might be able to get a couple of people from the shows we just mentioned, because I know a couple of them. A friend of mine I went to high school with is married to the Beaver. So,
wow.
You never know. Yeah, Jerry Matthews. He just turned 75.
Wow.
75 years old.
It's funny, too, because, you really don't realize how negative the codependency is until you literally step away and get into some really bad situation. Find out, that all your life you've been masking things by doing for others, and when you can't do for others anymore, then you kind of realize that you're
Well, Dean, I want to tell you something.
But it hurts. There's pain. We all have pain.
Yeah.
85% of everybody who I have dealt with on an intervention did not do it sooner and get the help that the person they loved, get them the help they needed, because of one reason.
They needed to be loved and being
codependency.
If they get their son or daughters well,
I mean,
what are they going to do with themselves, right? What do they do next?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do they do?
Yeah.
Going back to being alone, all one, God. They don't know the tools yet. And that's where you help, I help. Dean, with all his shows, the message is out there. But I love the personal effect with this, Dean. We're not just schmoozing about whatever in concerts. But
yeah, I don't normally talk about this. Rebel will tell you she's been with me for 11 years. I don't think she's heard most.
No, I honor it. I want you to know I honor it. I know I couldn't talk before the show because I'm too frazzled with everything, but it's human, and
and I'm tickled that you are proud to be a living, loving dad and ex-husband to the point of where you will admit your own faults.
Because you took responsibility as a man, as who Dean is, and you've got 8 grandchildren that adore you. So you see dysfunction and arguments and enabling. You see the disease in action all the time. Susie did this. Debbie said that. Michael wants this. So even if I rage, you get it because you're used to all the different personalities.
Do I know always how to handle you, Linda, when that happens? Like,
wait, say that again?
I said, don't I know how to always handle you instead of
he knows how to handle me. Yeah. He brings me down.
I'll tell you a quick funny story about me. In my room, there's a sign in my room that 2 of my daughters bought me. This says it all, okay? It says, my next wife won't be crazy.
Maybe not on Earth. We'll see about the next
And my answer to them was, I wouldn't bet on that.
That's right.
Well, you know, there's that old saying, you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep everybody warm.
Oh,
so,
no, that's a good one.
But I'm so codependent. My kids, neither one of them who are in their 40s have gotten married because I figured I'd give them everything. What do they need? I mean, you know, maybe a little sexual experience with somebody else, but just call me. I'll do it, you know. So I'm praying that someday they'll find somebody.
Well, Kelly kind of has again, but we'll see.
Well, let's not go into him, okay?
I've known her kids since I've known Candy 37 years. Yeah. So we go back and the kids are like just early 40s.
Tiny.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. So thank you for coming on and being a living example of learning and caring and trying to change who you are.
And you're a great dad and a businessman.
And thank you for having me and doing a great show, you guys, and helping so many people, because that's the key.
It is the key. We're going to wrap up. Do you have any last words, Candy, before we all say goodbye?
Keep doing what you're doing and tell yourself the truth, Dean, and we'll have you back on because we need you.
I think it would be a nice compliment at times, depending on our topics, as to what we're doing. Like last week, it was addiction as a family disease, but today was more about the behavior in our families. And it's not just the drinking and the drugging and the smoking or the sex or the shopping or the gambling or the food, or it's all stuff that we do to suppress how we feel or to isolate or to remove ourselves from the issue. We all fix somehow, you know. And vaping, I just can't. There's a new article about how vaping is, like we were talking about, the lungs that are being destroyed, and then they're comparing, you know, vaping versus real tobacco.
That's a whole other topic. Died of vaping
because of the chemicals going into the lungs. It's burning the lung tissue faster than anything. So there's a lot of content for us. But Dean, I would love to have you participate from a father, a businessman, a male, a grandfather, a human perspective. And you've lived over 50 years, so you've been there, done
for
that.
God's sake.
Yeah, well, he's older than I'm older than you're.
I'm older than anybody. Be quiet.
Well, I'm next. But it's sort of like experience. The beauty is his blinders are off, and he's like aware, and he's okay to say, "This is who I am. This is not acceptable for me." Hi, Papa Jeff. You came in at the end. It's nice to see you. I've been on his show. He's been on mine. We'll pick this up. I think it's important. I think it's the way we present it. We'll find, like I said, like maybe addictive love, or maybe we'll go more into codependency, or we'll take some case samples. And Candy's got plenty of ideas. We won't mention names, but we can set it up and talk about it. And hopefully more and more people on the channels will find us and hear it. And then if they want to reach Candy Finnegan off the air, what's your email address?
Candy Finnegan, it's FINNIGAN at AOL.com.
And I'm Dr. Linda at lindasalvin.com. And the information will be at the end of the show in just a moment when we have the ending. Dean, thank you. I'll talk to you in a few hours. Candy, you have fun in Malibu. I know what you're doing with the kids.
Yeah.
Everybody, this is Dr. Linda Salvin. You're watching, listening to Recovery Wednesday on whatever platform you are. Download, contact us. We're here to help you. And if you've got a problem with addiction of any of the substances, or you're having problems in the communication of the family unit, which we all do. We're here to help give some guidance, some solutions, because it's all there. Like the will of God.
Everybody's recovering from something.
Exactly. Everybody is recovering from something. And like the will of God will never lead you where the grace of God cannot keep you. So if you're just open, answers will come. If you're just open to what we have to say, we'll all recover. We'll see you next Wednesday. Thank you very much. And Bye, Dean. Thank you, everybody. See ya.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed Recovery Wednesday. You can reach Dr. Linda at 888-509-1077 or at lindasalvin.com and Candy Finnegan at candyfinnegan@aol.com. Need a breakthrough of your own? Ready for answers or insights nobody else has? Reserve your own one-on-one in-person chat. Dr. Linda isn't just for other people. Dr. Linda gets results for you. And it's easy. Contact details are on screen now. Just click on lindasalvin.com or call toll-free 888-509-1077. That's lindasalvin.com or toll-free at 888-509-1077.